Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Highruler, and today's video is going to be talking about this community post here on Twitter regarding Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Now, this was posted by Mr. Soldierman, who is a Suicide Squad streamer over on Twitch, and I've seen this stuff out, so if you guys are interested in a daily active streamer, go check his stuff out on Twitch. But this post in particular is kind of interesting because I've seen stuff like this before, and I think many of us have, right? And this is a big kind of pushback against the state of the game. Now, we're going to go through this and talk about it because I think there's some stuff here that's probably reasonable. There's some stuff here that probably isn't just never going to happen. But I think the more interesting thing is that people are just kind of done with the game as the state it's in, right? And these people have a choice, right? You either leave the game, you pack it up, move on, or you kind of hope to God that Rocksteady can, find their direction here with their community and fix the state of the game. And I think a lot of people have just decided to leave, frankly. And it's kind of interesting because yesterday I streamed it and I played about 4 to 5 hours on stream. And you know what the funny thing is that this game actually has a lot of fun to it, right? The character movement, the weapons, and everything kind of flows together in that combat situation, and it makes for a very fun experience, right? But then it's stacked upon a bunch of bullshit, right? So let's talk about the snipers, right? The snipers aren't fun. Trying to get around those guys, right? The enemy variety and the way they kind of stack the enemies together in these incursions just aren't fun, right? And then you're not even talking about the mutators and the modifiers, but you get into that conversation, and those just suck, right? Especially as you go higher mastery level and they pigeonhole you into certain things. And this post is going to have it, right? But even then, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit too, is that the hacker situation is just ridiculous, right? So there is so many things, and it almost feels like whack-a-mole almost, which you hit one thing and two more pop up. But Rocksteady needs to get a handle on this game. It might honestly be too late to kind of turn this around for the general masses here. It might honestly be. But for the community that you have left, for the people who want to play this game, I think Rocksteady owes it to those people to really kind of turn this thing around. And they probably owe it to themselves, too, for the amount of effort that it goes to make a game like this, to really figure out the best way to put their best foot forward and make sure that this game comes out on top of these situations that have just been developing, right? So let's talk about this, and we're going to go through each of these points here to see if this is something that, I personally believe that they can fix or add in or do something with, or if this is just something that is probably never going to happen, right? So the first one is Boomerang's Bleeding Edge, which is Boomerang's Bleed talent has been nerfed from dealing too much damage when using a sniper rifle or a shotgun, yet now the talent only does 1 damage over 10 seconds. I mean, nerfing in any video game, especially a PvE one, does suck, and we've seen that numerous times. Could this be something they fix? Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they see that the data presents that it's not, doing what it needs to do and it's undertuned, I would like to think that they'll, kind of fix that, but remains to be seen. Reward screen dismantle items feature. Yeah, this is a huge thing. This is almost like a no-brainer with as much gear as it throws at you, as you climb the higher mastery levels. I would like to think this is something that should be implemented, and the fact that it wasn't is kind of, but, if I'm going to put any sort of, probability on this one, I'd like to think that this will get fixed, but this should have already been in the game, right? Because, when you're playtesting and you're going, into higher mastery levels and you're getting like 8-9 pieces of gear, like this should be something they thought of and been like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, right? So more inventory space. Yeah, I mean, they gave us a brand new character, new weapons, new everything, and no new inventory space. I made a joke yesterday that obviously Bungie, would always talk about the data involved with giving, inventory space. It's a lot of data and the rest of it, right? And I think I made a joke that, why couldn't you give like the couple hundred players that are still playing the game more inventory space, right? But the truth is that if you're introducing new things, yeah, like technically you should be giving, more inventory to kind of, compensate for the more items that you're adding to the game here, right? So it's kind of mind-boggling that Rocksteady wasn't able to kind of, think ahead there. But, obviously, I'd like to think that more inventory space is something that's going to be coming. Hall of Justice mailbox, a delete feature for items that are moved to the mailbox due to full inventory so that players don't have to claim items just to delete them while it's in inventory. Additionally, there should be a delete all, claim all, mark all as red feature. Yep, this feels like another good quality of life feature. This should be something that's in the game. It's like a small quality of life feature that is such a small thing, but the impact is huge. So honestly, once again, just like the more inventory space, it should have been something that's in the game. Unfortunately, it's not. Okay, so let's talk about the battle pass points, because this has been a hot button topic with even Paul Tassi, kind of weighing in here. And I think it's like the most ridiculous amount of missions that you'll have to do in order to kind of complete your battle pass points here. And I think this is intended by design, right? And the reason why I think it's intended by design is that the gameplay loops themselves, people aren't very happy with, right? The incursions, the variety in the incursions, the way the incursions are built out. So like there's no bosses and kind of the enemies there, right? There's a lot of, critiques and criticism towards the incursions, right? So a lot of people don't want to play them, right? But how do you kind of make people play your game still, right? And it's the battle pass, and people are going to be playing the battle pass and trying to grind it out and get everything there. So to me, while yes, I do agree that more battle pass points should be rewarded and should be given in order to get players kind of, to that finish line a little bit sooner, I think by Rocksteady's data and their kind of interpretation of where they want to go, the way that the battle pass is actually built out is by design to keep players kind of engaged long term, right? To Jay Shockblast's point, Jay Shockblast put out a tweet saying that he'd actually be fearful of players moving on and not completing it because it's so bullshit of a grind. I would actually be, yeah, I'd probably agree with that, right? I'd be concerned if I'm Rocksteady, because I think Jay has the point here that there's a difference between a grind that's a meaningful grind and you're making good progress over time versus a grind that is, very bullshit, right? If I'm a betting man, I would imagine that if they are to make tweaks towards the battle pass, it would be at the launch of episode 2, nothing sooner than that. And they'll say like, oh, due to feedback, we've increased these values here, and it'll be like some sort of values to kind of make sure that players are still engaging in parts of the game that players may not want to, for example. So obviously this will be tweaked, I think. And if it was to be tweaked, I think it'll be at the start of, episode 2 and not anytime before that. But obviously this is by design, but definitely that design, it leaves a lot there. Incursion scaling. Enemies in the incursion missions deal too much damage to players versus the lack of damage that players can deal to enemies. There are numerous complaints about enemies are able to one-shot players in incursions as early as level 40. Tanks and helicopters are impossible to kill at high mastery levels. Additionally, enemies' range is far too great and makes high-level incursions overwhelming. All enemies are aimed at the player, yet they're able to one-shot and shoot at very far distances. We feel like you want us to lose. A proposition for incursion leveling is to scrap the idea of infinite incursion levels and make a level limit, make it more balanced to where enemies don't deal as much damage in early levels. At max level, we earn another currency that can be used to do harder incursions. Those incursions are expected to be harder with more mutators, but balanced and still fun. So I think the idea is that you're almost opening up to like a greater rift system. It seems like is the suggestion here. I don't disagree with the early parts of this. It does feel like the enemies scale way too high. I feel like damage reduction just doesn't exist either. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen some tweets pointing out that damage reduction may actually be broken. So if someone can actually confirm or deny that, I think I've seen Sadat talk about that. So I'm not actually sure because I haven't gone in there and like tested it. But if damage reduction is broken and the scaling is just off, then yeah, you're probably going to get one shot, and this does happen, right? Like, it does seem like at a certain point in time, you're being outscaled by the incursions no matter what you do. And I think, yeah, there's a part of it. And what they'll say is that, you need a complete mastery over your gear, your character, and whatever else. But it does get to a point now where it does feel like no matter what you do, you're going to get one shot, right? And it doesn't feel like a great experience. And no matter what you do, we've all seen players maybe in the Diablo section, right, where they're going all the way up to whatever they're doing in their rifts, right, back in Diablo 3, and they're still able to kind of dominate and do everything they can because the gear will scale to the highest degree. It's just a matter of min-maxing here, right? And I feel like, at least personally, even if I was to min-max my gear all the way to the top, right, like everything is master, everything is elite, and I'm getting the highest rolls possible. Yeah, I think if you're able to do that, you may be able to kind of get as high as you physically can by your playing, but I do think that the game might just be broken on a fundamental level with the way the numbers are calculated, and that does make it, not fun. Yesterday when I was playing and doing, kind of the incursions with Jay, we found that the snipers were just kind of crazy, right? Like, no matter what you did, you had like 4 or 5 different red beams just tracking you the whole time. And it's just like, it's brutal, right? And it kind of ties into the next point here of weapon damage. But it does feel like these incursions, especially with the mutators as they are right now, as the higher you go, the less fun the whole experience gets, right? And to that point, weapon damage is just not fun, right? And there's a reason why people will go for like grenade builds, right? Or anything like that, because it feels like grenade builds, especially as you go higher in the incursions, just offer more damage, more reliability, and the ability to clear out waves and waves and waves of enemies, right? I look to something like The Division, which Axel is very familiar with, and I see The Division as a game which Suicide Squad should be trying its best to emulate in so many different regards. Like, yes, of course, there are abilities in The Division, and there are things that you can use, but a lot of it comes down to great weapon play, right? What we've seen out of Suicide Squad so far has been just grenades, right? Like, grenades are king, and especially now with this season with the polka dot grenade, it almost feels like, yeah, you definitely need the polka dot grenade because you're going to be throwing them as much as you can, right? So to this point, weapon damage does feel a bit low, but I don't know how they'd fix that because it just feels like it's a core philosophy thing. And it feels like the moment you tweak weapon damage, you have to tweak everything else to make sure the weapons are now viable, right? Because right now it just feels like you have to do some sort of grenades in order to kind of do that, right? With the way poison works, and we're talking about limited build variety, with the way poison works, it does feel like polka dot grenade is one of those key ways to apply poison, and then you just keep doing it, rinse and repeat, right? So I mean, I haven't looked at the top level players. I mean, that opinion may be different than, say, someone like Lejeune, for example, or anyone on top of the leaderboard, which is not cheating. But to me, it feels like grenades are just the way to go. And they were last season as well. And to me, that points to a design philosophy rather than just kind of like a quirky, oh, like weapons, ha ha ha, right? So that's something that they need to work on. Limited build variety. Build potential is limited this season due to certain mutators making only certain types of build viable this season. Yep, this is by design as well. This is something that I think they're always going to do because they always want players to ditch the old gear and get the new gear. So with that philosophy and that solution, the question then becomes like, how do you work backwards from that? And the way you work backwards from that is that you restrict everything through mutators, right? Instead of kind of empowering things, right? So instead of making everything just stronger and, you know, making things viable across the board, but say, hey, if you want to use the new stuff, well, you're going to enjoy this kind of perk or this kind of bonus. You know, it's just basically like, oh, like you want to play Venom? Well, they're all immune this season, so I guess you're not, right? And that becomes just a very unfun experience, right? So this is from, you know, their design philosophy, and this is not something I don't think they'll change because they want people to use the new gear and they want people to feel like they're pigeonholed into it, frankly, right? So contradicting perks and mutators. The community doesn't like contradicting perks that have pros and cons. Below are some examples of the current season 1 mutators that are contradictory. Joker is a burn specialized character, yet burning enemies take 50% less damage. Enemies take 50% more damage from crit hits, yet crit hits hurt you for 2% of your maximum shield. Yeah, this is an interesting one here, you know. It's tough because I can kind of see where Rocksteady is going to come from this. Obviously, they want you to use different parts of the kit, use different parts of different perks. And because of that, they want you to kind of, you know, have a pro and a con to everything, right? So, you know, you do something which is a pro, but when you do it, there's a con and you have to kind of compensate for that con as well, right? They would actually probably say that's a really good gameplay, right? That's really good, innovative, you know, you have to be on your toes and thinking gameplay, right? But the community is going to kind of push back and say, well, that's not fun because you're kind of having to juggle so many different things. And while you're in the game, you're already juggling so many different enemies. So for me, I think this is kind of a mismatch between where Rocksteady's coming from and where the community is at. I don't think we'll ever see eye to eye here. Though personally, as someone who's played the game and played for 4 to 5 hours yesterday, yeah, I would agree that there's just some things that are just bullshit and are unfun. And I think this is where Rocksteady and any game developer will have to kind of, you know, take from what the community is saying and kind of adjust their expectations and what they're making and kind of what they're doing. And then the last one is enemies are immune to Venom Frenzy, yet crazy embrace enemy shields. Yep. I mean, that doesn't make sense. There's no way you could have like looked at that and said, yep, that makes sense. It just doesn't, it just, you know, doesn't pass the eye test, so to speak, right? So let's talk about nerfing previous viable builds. The nerfing of most builds that were previously viable in the last season to the point where they are no longer viable as a player in general gives the impression that developers don't want players to have fun with builds they find. The community understands the builds that were deemed overpowered to be nerfed, but there's been a recurrent issue where the items that are nerfed no longer works whatsoever. Examples have been given throughout this list. I think more than anything, this is just basically the players, you know, kind of saying that we want to play with the items that we want to play with, and I don't disagree. I would agree as well. And this is just a kind of design thing from Rocksteady's point of view that just doesn't align with the player interest, so to speak. And to me, this is something that I would like to see Rocksteady kind of fix and work on. But as I noted, that since Rocksteady wants players to play with the new stuff that they're adding, which we're going to talk about in, you know, a hot minute here, to me, this just doesn't seem like it's something that's going to be, you know, kind of fixed unless they really go back to the drawing board of what they're doing every season, right? Or every episode, whatever it's going to be. Because if they want players to use the new stuff, you know, they're going to try to make sure that the stuff that we have been using isn't the greatest anymore, right? But as I said, it needs to be a positive reinforcement than a negative reinforcement, right? Because, you know, what's the saying? You get more with honey rather than vinegar or whatever it is. My mom used to say it to me, and I'm sure many of you guys heard it as well. And that's what Rocksteady should be going with here, right? Use honey more than vinegar and you're going to have better success with what you're doing. And right now it's a lot of vinegar. So to me, it definitely seems like they need to do something with this in order to kind of make build crafting viable for the new stuff, but not alienating people who grinded so much for their old stuff and making them feel like, you know, they can't use that stuff anymore. Clan member limit and clan list. Yeah, I mean, this is all stuff that's good, right? Another quality of life feature. And this is stuff that I would like to see them kind of implement. And a lot of this stuff here is really good quality of life stuff. And I don't think there's really anything wrong in this list whatsoever. But, you know, is any of this stuff going to be implemented? And it's tough to say. It really is. You know, we kind of saw where season 1, episode 1 didn't have a lot of stuff attached to it, aside from like the new gear and then Joker. But like, it's kind of concerning, right, with the way things are going. And let's just quickly jump to the next point of this video, in that there are the hackers out there. And it's funny that this post didn't have it, but we're going to talk about the hackers in Suicide Squad and what this means for the community moving forward. So I feel like this video could have been its own thing here with the topic of hackers, right? But to speak on the post regarding the community and what the community wants, I think the first thing that the community should be, you know, kind of screaming about, as well as everything in that list, is the hacker situation. Because the hackers have completely alienated any sort of leaderboard incentive in this game whatsoever, right? What is the point of chasing leaderboards and chasing that high score and trying to do it legit if you have this person who is able to hack all these values, right? And just able to do all of this sort of stuff? It just completely negates any sort of chase. And the whole reason that a lot of people play this game is to get high in the leaderboard, right? And it's funny because I think a lot of people were expecting that QVK mode, which is like the Gambit from Destiny 2, coming. And I think a lot of people were hoping that a mode like that would kind of reinvigorate the community this season. And it seems like, how could they ever release a mode that has any sort of PvP in it when you have this guy running around with the damage numbers that he has, doing things that he's doing? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? So this post that I was reading on Twitter is good. It's great. There's a lot of legitimate things here, but I think Rocksteady is just a little in over their heads right now with so many issues with this game has, right? You know, not to say that there aren't technical issues. I still can't even play the Joker because it's not loading for me, right? So technical issues, things that are happening, right? Then you have the hacker situation and what they're doing and how the hell are they going to fix that? And then you have all these sorts of things that the community is wanting, right? And not to say that this doesn't happen with every live service game or every online game, because it does, and we all know it does. But the question is, with the way the game is going, with where the game is at, with everything happening, do we feel confident enough in Rocksteady to turn the tide here and make sure that everything turns out the best that it can be? A lot of us may say no. Some of us would say yes. And that's the question I'm going to leave with you guys today. At the end of this video, where do you see this game going? How do you feel about these issues that were presented? And do you think Rocksteady is competent enough to make these changes? And are you confident in their ability to do so without breaking the game even further? With that being said, that was the end of the video today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you guys want more Suicide Squad coverage, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a nice little comment, and I'll see you guys next time. As always, enjoy the rest of your day and the night. Take care of yourselves. Later, guys.